Hi, my name is Blake Kohler. I'm the CEO of Pulse for Good. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about how you can find valuable insights in data that you already have and things you may be caring about. But first, we're going to start a long time ago in Africa. In the early 1800s, there was a man who was obsessed with finding diamonds. You see, he figured if you could find the right diamond, he would never have to work again in his life. And he cared very much about finding a new diamond mine. And so at one point, he sold his farm and went and searched throughout all of Africa, attempting to find diamonds. Having spent his entire life attempting to find it, without any luck, he eventually decided to return to his farm and see how his local village was doing. When he got back, he saw a giant redevelopment of the area as a big industry had popped up. He eventually went in and asked what happened, and someone explained that a plot of land a little ways away from the place that he was at actually contained one of the largest diamonds anyone had ever found. Upon further research, he discovered that it was actually the farmer whom he had sold his land to that had found the largest diamond mine in Africa on the man's farm. Now, how does this apply to you? Well, as an organization, probably a nonprofit, you are sitting on mountains of data. This data may contain the diamonds that you need to be able to make your organization better, make it more profitable, make it more productive, and make its impact more powerful. Now, what data are we talking about? Compliance data. I know, just the word compliance is annoying, right? There's forms to fill out, there's processes to be done. None of it seems very fun to do. But the truth of the matter is you've been collecting feedback about your organization for years and maybe not noticing it. Today, we're going to talk about how compliance-based data is feedback and how you can use that feedback to improve your organization. Well, first, what is compliance-based feedback? What is a compliance process? Let's talk about it, right? So there's pretty obvious ones, right? There's the things that your compliance officer has you sign off and check, right? There's financial audits. There's grant reporting, right? There's program evaluations. There's board oversight. There's regulatory reviews. There's anything that is required in any type of funding source through federal or state government. All of that is compliance, right? There's also employee information that you have to fill out. There are various reports that you may have to do. Any of these things fall under this bucket of compliance data. One way that you may know that it's compliance data is, have you filed it away somewhere in case someone needs to come look at it in the future? This is a really good sign that this is compliance data and information that you are sitting on that may actually be a diamond mine in plain sight. So now that we know what compliance data is, let's talk a little bit more about it. So nonprofits generate a tremendous amount of compliance data throughout the year just by the basis of there's certain requirements they have to fulfill. There's reports, there's all sorts of things. They're probably filed and put in a filing cabinet. But when's the last time you actually looked at that information as something that can help your organization grow? When was the last time you actually looked at the information and not just signed off and moved on? But most of the time, you're sitting on a bunch of information that you can use to improve your organization if you just take time to actually sit down and look at it and file it instead of just filing it away. So we're going to go through a few of these things, a few different types of compliance information that we get, and a few different ways that we can utilize it to improve. What we're going to talk about is what compliance-based feedback actually is, where it shows up inside of your organization, why so much of that feedback goes underutilized, and potential strategies for utilizing this feedback that you're already gathering combined with other feedback mechanisms and how that can change your organization. All right, so we mentioned briefly what compliance-based feedback is. Here's a few other things to note. Compliance-based feedback is often legal requirements, grant obligations, ethical standards you have to keep up, or governance expectations, right? They're things that sometimes you're giving to a board, sometimes you're providing to a funder, sometimes you need to keep around just so you don't get sued, right? A lot of those are compliance. Now, being compliant in something doesn't necessarily mean you're good at something. We want you to take you that next step from being compliant to being great. Compliance is often there for organizational accountability, to help you be accountable for the things that you're supposed to be doing, right? It's making sure processes tend to be in place that need to be there, but it doesn't often say if processes are good or bad. Now, there's a hunch that we have that in most of your compliance data, you will find whether or not something is good or bad, whether it's working or not. The question is how often are you paying attention to it? Compliance often sadly gets wasted, mainly because compliance takes a lot of time and effort. I'm sure there's somebody out there, a compliance officer, nodding in how much effort it takes to stay on top of it. When you're filling out your 50th piece of paperwork for the day, sometimes it can be hard. And so one of the things to overcome is this compliance fatigue, right? You can get really tired in trying to keep up with everything. Another big thing to overcome is informational silos. A lot of times this information belongs to the compliance officer or to the executive director or maybe a chief operating officer and isn't shared amongst the rest of your executive team. Another issue is fear of scrutiny, right? Sometimes it's like a friend that I have that talks about getting their taxes done. I asked him if their tax accountant's good. He says, I don't know. I don't want to look into it. Right? And sometimes the fear of knowing is actually one of the biggest things that prevents us from looking deeper into things because we're worried that we may find something unsavory. Although when we start looking into it, we're also able to find some wonderful things as well. And then the last portion, and sometimes is the biggest, is translating that compliance data into data that we can actually use. And sometimes people feel like that gap is just too much to overcome. When we think about compliance and we think about those 4 issues, one of the important things is to start reframing this entire conversation as an opportunity for growth. When you think of your compliance process as not just something to check off, but really a beginning of a true feedback loop, you can look at it as having a step of accountability of, hey, we're going to meet the requirements that we need. Accountability is great. It always increases the performance when we're accountable for the results that we have. But when you combine accountability with the next step of transparency, and you start showing how you're doing, all of a sudden you're able to then use that information to start making steps in the right direction and be able to move and improve. So if you're trying to figure out how to take these steps, to go from especially building those first 2 steps in this process of accountability and transparency, to take your compliance information, and go from compliance to feedback, here's some questions to ask. First, what patterns are emerging across your reports? Right? One of the things that requires to do is look at multiple reports at once, maybe multiple years of reports or multiple months of reports, and not just say we've finished this report and put it away for a while. The second thing is what recurring issues are popping up? What things do we see year after year, month after month? And how can we start addressing those? If there's things showing up in audits and they're showing up more than one time, it's a really good indicator that we may need to build some better processes or better things around it. That's just feedback. It's feedback coming to you in a form of a checkbox or a questionnaire instead of a form of a client comment. Right. The next question will be, what are staff struggling with in this process? What is hard for them to do? What thing is causing them heartache? What is leading to that compliance fatigue? As you start understanding those type of things, and one way to see it is what things are routinely not getting done in your compliance process. I'm hoping you're perfect with your compliance process. The reality is you're probably not. There's probably things you struggle with. There's probably reports that are incomplete. There's probably steps that are done half-heartedly. When you can identify those, oftentimes those can be a red flag or a signal that there's something wrong and you need to be able to adjust either the process in grabbing that or the general process in general. And then the last question is what operational improvements could we make here? How could we take this data, find the patterns and trends that we're having issues with, and translate into something we can do to improve? When we start painting this as accountability, transparency, and improvement, it gives you an opportunity to develop a pattern of not just having compliance, but of having improvement. Compliance is a status quo, which is good. You need that. But to really impact people's lives, you need to go from that status quo to improvement. Now, there's a few different things to think about as you go through this process. One is if you can integrate these compliance conversations into your leadership discussions, right? Make sure that they're in there talking with the groups that can actually make decisions and changes. Another one is making sure you can translate these findings into operational language that matters for you. The other thing is making sure you have feedback loops, both the formal through compliance and informal through other tools. And then last, tracking those recurring compliance issues. Compliance is one of those things that really require you to have some processes in place. And sometimes it's a prerequisite, but it can also be a competitive advantage. As you go through the feedback, you gain a clearer view of how operations are happening. You get better operational visibility into what's going on. You strengthen your governance and be able to understand what's actually happening and the oversight into the processes. You also improve your performance by finding small areas that need to be improved inside of the feedback that you gather. And lastly, you build better confidence in your funders and shareholders by helping them see that this compliance isn't just a checklist item for you. It's something you do to actually improve your services. Now, if you can try and manage this transformation from just gathering compliance as a checkbox to really building a learning system inside of your organization using your compliance data, you can do what the proverbial man in Africa did. You can find diamonds where you're already at. You see, you're sitting on tons of operational data, probably filed away in a filing cabinet not far from you right now. If you can build a system that can allow you to find insights out of that information and couple it with a feedback system that gathers feedback from the people you're serving in real time, you have everything you need to be able to provide more value than you're currently doing. People look all over the world for a better way to serve the people they're serving without often looking beneath their feet at the information they already have. So the next step would be going out and look through your compliance information, check your processes, see how you're using it. Is this just a checklist for you, or is this something you're actually using to improve your organization? When you start doing that, you'll find the diamonds that will help your organization get better. If you're interested in how Pulse for Good helps organizations gather feedback, please visit our website to learn more